So this is it, the terminus for our regimental road. I know there are many more worlds I could visit, and I may well do so one day, but this is it for now. And I couldn't have chosen a better place to finish, as we arrive at a world that is perhaps the deadliest place in the Imperium, or even the entirety of real space if you don't count the warp shenanigans. Maybe even if you do, it's that lethal. It is so deadly, in fact, that it doesn't even need defending. The natural wildlife and plants handle that. Not even a space marine wants to be here for long if they value their life. And yet, despite being the most inhospitable place to probably everything, humanity survives on this world. Not only that, but to some extent you might even say it thrives, even able to contribute to the Astra Militarum, the sole export of their jungle hellhole of a home. Said regiments are, due to having survived on the greatest of death worlds, invariably tough, skilled, and cunning, and their reputation as humanity's finest, or at least some of them, is well earned. Said world is the jungle death world of Catachan, and the proud regiments raised from it are known collectively as the Catachan Jungle Fighters. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to the final part of Regiments of Renown, a 40k Stories miniseries. Catachan, or Catachan, opinions seem to vary on pronunciation, is located in western Ultima Segmentum, practically at the galaxy's centre. At a glance, it could be mistaken for a jungle world covered in lush greenery, and in fact in a time before the Imperium, this is exactly what the original human colonists thought. How wrong they were. Once they landed, well, crash landed, there was no way out, and they were embroiled in a never-ending, desperate fight for survival. Because Catachan, as I mentioned earlier, is the most lethal of death worlds in the galaxy. Everything there wants to kill you, and can also kill you very easily. Vines are able to crush bunkers and tanks, poison can melt mortar, and any time something is built, it seems like the world itself turns on the structures. Truly it feels as though Catachan itself wants to kill you, and who am I to argue it? And all that comes before you get to the fauna, which is just as murderous as the flora, which is probably no surprise given said flora's murderous potential. The most famous of these is the creature known as the Catachan Devil, a scorpion-like monster that can be as long as a land train, so pretty damn long, with jaws as large as a battle tank. Be thankful this thing is slow, or I doubt anything could survive encountering it. Such is the danger of the Devil that it is an invasion deterrent in and of itself, a fact used by the Imperium, who have sometimes captured it and other Catachan flora and fauna for use on its other worlds. Sounds crazy, is crazy, but it works, I suppose. Well, sometimes. And that is just a snapshot. So if you like being horrifically murdered on your interplanetary holiday, be sure to pay Catachan a visit. I'm not landing there, I've got a job to do, damn it. However, despite everything I just said, humanity has been able to survive from those crash-landed colonists through to today. It's not exactly the most prosperous of worlds, mind you. Most everything the populace needs to survive must be imported, but the planet has yet to kill them despite its best efforts. Life on Catachan is fraught with risk. The flora alone can destroy any fortifications built, so the vast fortresses constructed on man-cleared plains are almost always being rebuilt to some extent, and they must even be abandoned as the wildlife gathers in such numbers as to drive the humans out. This means that only the most quick-witted, toughest, and deadliest of the populace can survive. Kids learn to shoot before they can walk, somehow, and though only 25% make it past age 10, those that do will already be killing machines and survivalists in equal measure. This means that your average Catachan, the person not the planet, is taller and stronger than your average human, as natural selection probably killed off the rest over the generations. At an unknown time, however, the Imperium's Departmentum Militarum came to see the value of Catachan and its people, realizing that the survivors of the deadliest death world probably make excellent soldiers. Spoiler alert, they do. And so millennia ago, a deal was made. The Militarum keeps the populace alive with food and other supplies, and the planet contributes troopers to the Astra Militarum, forming regiments known as the Catachan Jungle Fighters. We're unsure when this deal was made, both in terms of dates and relative to Catachan's colonization, which is a shame as it would intrigue me to know whether it was pre or post Horus Heresy, i.e. during or after the Great Crusade, and how long Catachan actually had to survive before the Imperium got involved. No matter their posting, the regiments of jungle fighters take it without complaint and with an enthusiasm most would mistake for bravado until they had to fight them. After all, when you survived on a place like Catachan, pretty much any world or battle is a luxury holiday by comparison to home, so what's the point in moaning? If you can believe it, some people have been so mad as to try and invade Catachan down the years. However, we know of very few. If there have been any more over the millennia, they won't have gotten far. It may not surprise you to know Catachan has no standing planetary defense force. The flora and fauna do that better than the humans ever could, and even if you survive all of that, you still have the jungle fighters to deal with. But that hasn't stopped some from trying. The most recent we know of seemingly happened one right after the other, though the first is rather hazy in terms of information. Catachan found itself unwarned and in the path of two foes, an orc war led by the infamous Captain Badrock, and a wounded void whale, a titanic warp-spawned entity with its own ecosystem inhabiting its thousands of miles long body. However, we have no idea whether either whale or war ever hit the Death World, but if they did, either Catachan and its people dealt with them, or what came later did. But like so many other worlds following the fall of Cadia in the 13th Black Crusade, Catachan was embroiled in the grip of the Imperium. It's not too far from the Cicatrix Maledictum itself, but it's still in what I term colloquially as the Light Imperium, on the Terran side of the Great Rift. This meant that, like Mordian, Armageddon, and so many other worlds, Catachan was invaded by the demonic forces of Chaos. However, unlike on those aforementioned worlds, there was no corruption of parts of the world to be had, no conquering of the sector for Chaos, as not only did the jungle fighters in their homes see the demons off, but they saw them off in style. In fact, by the time the Indomitous Crusade under Robert Gilliman arrived at Catachan, presumably to recruit members of the jungle fighters as much as anything else, the demons had already been seen off by the world and its people. Just the locals, mind you, not even a need to call back the veterans on campaign. Truly, the Catachan jungle fighters are just on another level. They're obviously a very different breed to the Cadian shock troops who are arguably more renowned, but I hesitate to run the hypothetical of one regiment against the other in a straight fight, because good grief, it would be one hell of a scrap. The organisation of a Catachan jungle fighters regiment is as near to a carbon copy as possible of the hierarchy back home. Catachan is a tribal world, or at least its denizens still use tribal traditions, and these will spill over into the regiments. As such, every officer from sergeant to commander is elected by the soldiers, and there is often geographical and even familial ties amongst an individual regiment. It's not even unheard of for said ties to cross the generations. As a result, there is almost never a case of soldiers rebelling against their officers' orders. They elected that individual because they were believed best suited for the job, and if said individual screws up, then if they survive, I assume they're just elected out. Combine this with the tribal bonds between members, and you find that the unity of a jungle fighters regiment is borderline unmatched. I called the Vostroyan Firstborn like a family, but the Catachan are family, literally in some cases. Unfortunately, this Catachan unity comes with a healthy dash of xenophobia, and not the kind the Imperium encourages. Catachans are notably distrustful of outsiders, even resentful of them. This means that if an off-worlder does win the respect of the jungle fighters, then damn have they earned it, but it also means that commissars, outsiders all from the Order of Prefectus, are completely unwelcome amongst the Catachan. Many regiments mark them entirely, in fact. Perhaps this is a testament to the jungle fighters that their bonds are strong enough not to require commissariat discipline, but the main reason is they have no respect for the off-worlders, and will more than often not just end up fragging them, assumedly, by accident. In terms of actual composition for a regiment, I doubt it varies too wildly from a standard one if it isn't specialised, but there are differences even before we get to equipment. As everyone who can survive Catachan is pretty much a veteran already, there are no veteran squads, so to speak, but the finest of the regiment's warriors are formed into squads known as Catachan Devils after the predator we mentioned earlier, and their knives, we'll get to that. These are the elite of the elite, razor-sharp warriors skilled as ambushers and raiders or as frontline specialists. Every company will also often maintain a small corps of autonomous veteran snipers, about 3 per company usually, who are beyond even the renowned ratlings in both skill and patience. Oh, and their cavalry have dinosaurs or other native giant reptiles as mounts, because of flipping course they do. As concerns equipment, the Militarum has relatively little difficulty equipping the jungle fighters for war. For a start, they have little to no armour. Apparently these guys, known colloquially to some, presumably out of earshot, as baby ogrins, are so tough they can just take as much punishment, if not more, than a regular armoured human. Probably helps they have a large number of skilled field medics too. No need for medals either, as the Catachans look on them with disdain and as a dead giveaway of position, so tattoos and markings are used as both symbol of honour and of role. The main unifier amongst the jungle fighters in terms of appearance is their bandana, red to symbolise not only surviving Catachan, but also the blood oath all warriors take when they enlist. Weapon-wise, the heavy bolter and the flamer take pride of place. The latter makes total sense for jungle fighters, but I'd be curious about the reasons for the heavy bolter. Maybe it's just the most consistent wildlife killer back home, I'm not sure. Whatever the case, there is a second specialism for the equipment of the Catachans: explosives. And of course snipers, but explosives are more fun. Due to their skill set, the jungle fighters are some of the best users of demolition charges and their equivalents, both normal and improvised, as well as less explosive mines that can shred their opponents. Said skill set is, of course, jungle warfare, where a single Catachan can be worth up to 10 regular guardsmen, but it also takes the form of ambush, which explains the snipers in mines. However, perhaps uniquely among the Astra Militarum, close quarters melee combat is a specialism of the jungle fighters, and to that end, the soldiers all have their special Catachan knives, or fangs, or whatever they call them. These are made from a special alloy only found on Catachan itself, so the only way to get the genuine article is probably to prize it from the hands of a jungle fighter. However, the knives are more than simple weapons. They're status symbols, ranking symbols that can vary between tribes and families based on preferences. So good luck getting one unless they're dead, because they aren't giving them up and they aren't letting them go. In fact, making your own knife is one of the tests of adulthood on Catachan, so you have no chance getting one off them. Just don't even try. The largest of these knives are known as the Devil's Claw, named after the Catachan devil and more a sword than a knife wielded by officers, though it's a power sword rather than a regular one. And it's also wielded by the Catachan devil veterans we mentioned earlier, which is partly why they get their name. So renowned in fact is the Devil's Claw, the Orcs have a special name for it, Tactica, and it has a fearsome reputation amongst the Greenskins, which should tell you a heck of a lot about just how deadly the thing is. As you might expect, given their reputation, the Catachan jungle fighters have been involved in a heck of a lot of warfare over the millennia, sometimes alone and sometimes as part of wider armies. The first I wish to discuss is known as the Cytherian Annexation, a war against the Tau Empire during the third sphere of expansion in M41 on the jungle world Cytheria. 7 separate Catachan regiments were present for this battle, which seems excessive until you consider the Adeptus Mechanicus research facility on Cytheria. They may be the best the Imperium had in a jungle, but no one was taking any risks. Unfortunately, even the combined abilities and the numbers of the jungle fighters would prove not to be enough. Hailing from the Sept of Borkan, the Tau used their stealth and battlesuit technology to establish a beachhead, before systematically destroying any armour the Catachan could bring to bear. Now completely outmatched in a straight fight, the Catachans retreated to the jungles of Cytheria, engaging in a hugely successful guerrilla war that may have swung momentum in the long run had the Ethereals leading the town not sensed the swing and changed tack appropriately. They attacked a key communications area, forcing the skirmishing jungle fighters into the straight fight they could never win, and though they weren't wiped out, this battle signalled the end of true Catachan resistance. That said, the survivors are said to still be out there somewhere, causing trouble for the now mostly pacified Cytheria, so due credit to them for not giving up even in the face of impossible odds, and for nearly turning the war in the first place until that Tau response. However, on another occasion, the skirmish ambush tactics of the jungle fighters paid off in spades, where they squared off against Orcs on Kato, a shadow world. Though, honestly, I'm actually not sure what that is. It has low visibility and tough terrain. Maybe that's what it means. The war here was something of a stalemate for a while, until the Catachan struck a massive blow by destroying the Orc Stomper factory and denying the Greenskins a major asset. As expected, the Orc response was vicious and all but overwhelming, But the Catachans were ready. Well-laid ambushes and cool-headed leadership saw the Orcs utterly crushed and destroyed just 3 days after the Stomper factory was destroyed. A more mixed bag of a campaign was on the death world of Moraz III, a dangerous jungle in itself used as a training world by the jungle fighters. I assume because it's safer than Catachan, they can run drills or practice tactics without the ever-present risk of being horribly murdered. A rogue trader's ship crashed into the planet, and from it came a gene stealer that was able to found a gene stealer cult on the death world, known as the Cult Viridian. It is unknown how long the cult was able to remain in hiding for before its discovery, though it will have been a while, as I believe there was more than one gene stealer by that point, so it probably got through a full breeding cycle. Whatever the timescale, at some point the cult Viridian either was found or revealed itself, with the Catachans assumedly putting their training to good use against the cult. The war itself was a great success, as the human hybrid members of the cult were wiped out to the last, perhaps even including the Patriarch, but unfortunately the actual gene stealers were able to escape into the jungle. The Catachans eventually left because they thought the job was done, but before too long the gene stealers were Moraz III's alpha predator, and perhaps a new, more insidious gene stealer cult will spring up, having learned the lessons of its predecessor. This isn't the only time jungle fighters have fought gene stealer cults, however, as more recently they were part of a battle group tasked with dealing with a rather large one on the forest world Greshien's Garden after the appearance of the Cicatrix Maledicta. Though initially, if slowly successful, the war became much less open as the cult retreated into the forest and much of the Imperial strength was called away to the Plague Wars in Ultramar. This turned out to be a good thing, though, as the Gene Stealer cult uprising, as it so often is, was a herald for something far worse, an incoming Tyranid Hive Fleet, in this case a splinter of Hive Fleet Jormungandr. Realising they couldn't win, the remaining Catachan forces enacted a slash and burn policy, literally burning almost the entire planet and the Gene Stealer cult to ash before the splinter could arrive. This meant that, although the Catachans themselves were consumed, they robbed the Tyranids of what may have been vitally needed biomass. We cannot keep tabs on every splinter, so it's hard to know whether this had much of a long-term effect, but it was quick thinking by the jungle fighters that has to be respected. Finally, though it was hardly a fight all about them, there are Catachans present on Armageddon for its third and currently ongoing war. However, it's possible that these 3 regiments were not brought in by the typical methods of being nearby or what have you, and that they were called in by Commissar Yarrick personally. Either that, or the Commissar realised he had Catachans in the muster and had a brainwave, because the jungle fighters were not sent to the hives to help defend against Gazkul's War, but instead to the jungles separating Armageddon Prime and Secundus. Yarrick had assumed that the Catachans would be ideal for helping out the Armageddon Orc Hunters, a mixture of survivors of the Second War on Armageddon from a variety of worlds who operated in said jungle, hunting the feral orcs who had sprung up between the wars. Orcs will want to do that given their reproductive cycle. Though the Orc Hunters were already feared and renowned amongst both orcs and humans by the time of the Third War, becoming skilled in many of the skills the Catachans have, even if their nature does rub a few the wrong way, they were still far from on the same level as their new help. How much the Catachans have had to do since their arrival is unknown, but it is known that many of them see the action in the equatorial jungles as pretty much just paid leave, so it certainly doesn't seem to be bothering them over much. Though, to be fair, leave on Catachan likely gets you killed, so Armageddon's probably quite nice by comparison, since the jungle itself isn't murderous. I'd be intrigued to know how much interaction they've had with one orc in particular, the only one said to strike fear into the orc hunters, Boss Snickrot. The boss of the infamous Red Skull Commandos is a nasty piece of work, who's had interaction with jungle fighters in the past. We'll get to that in a minute. And he and his boys are thought to have become so one with their environment as to be almost not real, a mythical scare story for children. But somehow, I feel like a meeting with some well-prepared Catachans would give Snickrot and his lads, let's just say, quite the challenge. Just about everyone in the Catachan jungle fighters is something of a hero, since even surviving the place they come from is a pretty high accolade in itself, but there are some amongst them who are nothing short of legends. The first is a mysterious individual, a man with origins known to few, and a supposed list of heroics that would put anyone to shame who isn't a Primarch, Guardsman Sly Marbo. Though his story is lost to history, it is believed he was originally part of the Catachan 12th Regiment, first appearing in records as being a near sole survivor of a battle on Riser against Orcs, returning to base alone with the war boss's head. From there, the legend of Private Marbo only grew. He has single-handedly stopped armies and won wars, at least if everything told about him is to be believed. An entire Drukhari raiding party, witches and mandrakes included, cut down with their leader on a spike. A Tau armoured column destroyed in its entirety by a collapsed ravine. Tyranid lictors hunted for sport. The list goes on and on. Marbo is a wanderer and a loner, shunning the company of others and seeing the aid of any as a liability or an annoyance. But whether he is deployed, you can guarantee the enemies of Catachan or the Imperium will be left as nothing more than a pile of corpses and ruined armour. Where Marbo is at this moment is unknown, but during the 13th Black Crusade he is believed to have started a one-man war on the forces of the ruinous powers. Such was the devastation he caused wherever he went, that the only ones believed to be responsible were actual Space Marines. But no, it was a bloke from Catachan with an envenomed knife and an armour-piercing poisoned auto-pistol. Ridiculous. One of the worlds Marbo is known to have fought on was the mining world of Dul Malin, where he shared the field of battle with another Catachan legend, the commander of the Catachan 2nd Regiment, Colonel Iron Hand Strachan, the man of adamantium. Strachan rose to command in the shadow of the famous Colonel Grice, who in turn had been guarded by legendary ogre in Nork Dedog for a time. But it was on Dul Malin that Grice would be killed in an Orc ambush. This left Strachan, Marbo and the Catachan 2nd rather stranded, forced into the employment of guerrilla warfare against the much larger War for the best part of a year. At some point in this war, Strachan would actually fall foul of the aforementioned boss Snickrot, but because he's Iron Hand Bloody Strachan, he was able to see the commando boss off. This is probably a good time to explain the nicknames that Strachan has. He's been extensively implanted with replacement bionics, including one of his eyes and much of his upper torso and right arm, which were lost fighting a land shark on the death world of Miral. This makes him incredibly tough and physically strong, stronger perhaps than even a Space Marine out of power armour, something that would serve him well at the end of the year-long war on Dul Malin. Strachan and his best demolition teams managed to infiltrate the main Orc stronghold, but once the alarm was raised, Strachan found himself going one-on-one with a massive warlord leading the war. And despite said warlord being tough enough to take a shotgun to the face and live, Strachan emerged victorious once again, goading a Squiggoth to crush the Orc after the pair fell from atop it. Strachan should, by all rights, have died, but a certain sly Marbo was able to get him out as the cavernous greenskin base was destroyed. Such a no-man-left-behind attitude is encouraged and embodied by the Colonel. It is said he once dragged a wounded trooper halfway across a continent at one point, and his soldiers repay him in kind by making sure that no matter what befalls him, he's always brought to the medical teams to be patched up again. As a warrior, Strachan has proved himself time and time again. Single-handedly killing Drukhari Archons or decapitating Tyranid Hive Tyrants is the tip of the iceberg. The icing on the cake, perhaps, is defeating a phalanx of demon engines with 22 men, 10 lasguns, and short-fuse demolition charges. I mean, what on earth? Yet as a commander, Strachan also excels, following in the footsteps of his mentor, Colonel Grice. As you might expect, he firmly believes in getting stuck in personally, and if a battle goes by without his near catchphrase, "Do I have to do everything myself?" then I'll be amazed. But he also cares a fair whack, I suspect, never leaving anyone behind as mentioned earlier, and always handling disciplinary matters personally and trying to avoid execution despite the complaints of the commissariat. Plus, despite his pretty much flat-out refusal to die, you don't live as long or succeed as often as Strachan has without a sharp tactical mind, and though he's bombastic and belligerent as they come on Catachan, woe betide you if you underestimate him for even a microsecond. The last of the famous Catachans I wish to explore in depth is also of the Catachan 2nd, this time one of its gunnery sergeants, Stone-Tooth Harker. According to popular myth, Harker's legend began on the death world Aurea Asceti, where he and his platoon were deployed to handle a small Orc warband that turned out to be a rather nasty bunch of blood axes, sneaky gits all. The entire platoon was slain, all save Harker, who was able to retrieve a heavy bolter from one of the slain heavy weapon teams, lift it single-handedly, and use it to cut down the orcs. Yes, this man can carry and fire a heavy bolter on his own, a task normally requiring 2 fully trained soldiers to complete, but that isn't even the end of it. Still armed with that heavy bolter known as Payback, Harker has, in his own words, killed half a dozen or so Catachan devils, and if you listen to those who serve under and alongside him, then you can believe the hype that if a being can kill him, it's yet to exist. On a twilight world known as Jawn 5, he and his squad were ambushed by Tyranid Raveners, who were able to deny Harker his gun for a moment by ripping apart the ammo loader. This didn't deter the sergeant, however, as he crushed the neck of the nearest Ravener with his bare hands before grabbing Payback and finishing off the rest. But as with Iron Hand Strachan, do not let the brute strength of Harker's body undermine your opinion of his mind. The gunnery sergeant has mastered most every field of warfare, even if his tactical brain isn't on the same level as some, and he prefers to shoot his way out of a tight spot rather than talk or come up with a clever alternative. Perhaps that is why, despite his probably well-earned reputation as a larger-than-life hero, and yes, that's slightly a pun, Harker has not been lined up as a potential successor to said Colonel Strachan. Either that, or the Man of Adamantium just never intends on dying. It could be either. Finally, I just quickly wish to draw attention to one final jungle fighter, Colonel Death Strike, so nicknamed for being about 88% as effective as a Death Strike missile in bringing death to his foes. He and his 183rd Regiment were rather stranded on the planet Pythos around the time of the massive invasion of Abaddon the Despoiler and Huron Blackheart, seeking to open something known as the Damnation Cache and unleash demonic hordes on the Death World. The Chaos Forces succeeded, seizing the capital and forcing the Imperials to flee into the jungles in what would become known as the Pandarax Campaign, and Strike somewhat became planetary governor and rallying point for the forces. Though they could not hope to win, Strike was able to keep Imperial resistance on Pythos going long enough for reinforcement to arrive in form of the Dark Angels and the Grey Knights. Strike himself was honoured by Supreme Grandmaster Azrael for preventing the total fall of the planet, and the Colonel and his modified Baneblade were some of the first to land in the final assault on the Damnation Cache. Strike remains as Commander-in-Chief of all Imperial military on Pythos, somehow dodging extermination by the Grey Knights, and he and his forces routinely sweep for any lingering or new warp rifts caused by the now sealed caches destabilising of reality. So end the tales of the Catachan jungle fighters. Truthfully, I have naught but respect for the people of Catachan, as they are able to survive the deadliest place in the galaxy and then go on to serve with distinction in the Imperium's armies. Beneath their supposed bravado and lack of respect lie incredibly skilled warriors, able to carry the day no matter the odds, and in the art of jungle warfare, I would almost never bet against them. This visit to Catachan also marks the end of our Regiments of Renown mini-series, looking at some of the greatest and best known members of the Astra Militarum. I regret I was unable to visit every world and profile every regiment, but I feel pleased with the worlds we have visited as they show how diverse the so-called Hammer of the Emperor truly is. Will we cover more Regiments of Renown in future? Quite possibly, and they will be added as addendum logs to this official series, but this is the end of the road for now. As a final remark, I must express how much respect and admiration anyone should have for the Imperial Guard. These regiments might be the creme de la creme, but the entire faction is made up of heroes just like them, and humanity owes them a great debt. So, I suppose, where to next? Well, I had a long, hard think on my way to Catachan, and I thought the best group to go and discuss would be some of the most fervent seekers of knowledge within the Imperium. No one knows their origins, though rumour suggests it may be from a less than reputable source by today's standards, and I hope you can join me for that soon. For now though, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I hope you've enjoyed our Regiments of Renown mini-series. I'll see you all again. Goodbye.